Welcome back to the rules of engagement. First, I'm going to do a brief overview of the TY versus Innovation series, and then we'll get on to some questions and answer. So if you've been watching this show, and if you watched the series last night, you'll have known that Innovation won the series 3-1. What I thought was particularly interesting was how the series started out with both players going for those Hellbat drops. And as the series evolved, they started to learn a little bit better about how to counter those drops. And then, of course, we noticed Baby in the end was able to counter very effectively, but Innovation still won just from Baby making up some micro mistakes when dealing with that. So I'm about to jump into some questions and answers, but before we jump into that, let me remind you guys to please check out www.fullsail.edu if you're at all interested in graphic design, computer animation, game design, video production, audio engineering, all these cool things that go kind of combined. You saw some of it in that promo video just before the segment aired. If you're interested in anything related to building a game, like Starcraft 2, League of Legends, Call of Duty, etc., please go check out that website and get a little more information on potential ways to develop a career in that field. Now let's jump into some questions and answers. And the first question is going to be from Yever Papazov. And it says, how can I determine whether to go armor or attack or double upgrade? Thank you very much for rules of engagement. So there's a couple of rules of thumb. One is when in doubt and you have decent economy. This is 3 base or even 2.5 to 3 base economy, somewhere in there. When in doubt, get double upgrade. If you have a little bit lesser economy, you're starting upgrades faster. When in doubt, get a single upgrade, and when in doubt, get the attack one. Now, there's some cases where the armor is better. Examples, if you're Protoss and you're playing against a Bio-Terran, if you're only going 1 upgrade, generally get that armor upgrade for most games. And other times, if you're Zerg and you're not sure if you want to go Roaches or Zerglings later in the game, go ahead and get the armor upgrade because that helps everything. So there's a couple exceptions, but in general, if you're on 1 to 2 base economy and you're already getting your upgrades, go ahead and get attack. If you're on 2 to 3 base economy, like a higher 2 base to 3 base economy, go ahead and get double upgrades as a general rule of thumb. Next question is going to be from Mr. 7. How does one make a good practice schedule while also making room for other non-SC2 things? So one of the best ways to do this is to first of all say non-SC2 is not as important. I'm going to play Starcraft 2 all day, and that could be your one thing. But for a more healthier schedule, you have work, you want to be, you have other commitments with friends, you want to do other things, other hobbies, etc. There's 2 ways to do it. One is to do it kind of like you do your workout schedule. Maybe set aside like a half hour, an hour every day to play a couple games. Maybe in the morning before work, maybe right when you get off of work, you play a couple games and you go out for the night, right? You can have this kind of build up a routine where you limit yourself to, a certain schedule, and that way you don't end up spending your whole day playing StarCraft, but also you make sure to fit in a little bit. I know that's the problem I have is I either kind of don't play or once I start playing, I'll just keep playing for hours and forget about it. So if you kind of schedule it, that can help. But also, the whole point of it is it's fun, right? I mean, you're talking about a good practice schedule, but really, you should be playing StarCraft 2 mostly for fun. And still play it whenever you feel like it. And if you're having a hard time, you're not getting your work done because you're playing too much, then just say, all right, every time I feel like it, I'll play some StarCraft 2, but I'm going to set a timer and I'm going to stop after 2 hours, right? That way I don't use up my whole day playing StarCraft 2. So, carry your cell phone has an alarm built into it. Look what time it is, set an alarm for 2 hours from now. And that's a good way to help, pace yourself from eating up your whole day. So let's jump on to the next question from Augustus. He's played a total of 1.5 thousand games between StarCraft 1 and StarCraft 2, and I'm currently top silver. Am I progressing too slow, or is it okay? So one thing to consider is that, that sounds like a lot of games, but you're talking about, SC came out 96. So this is over, a 16-year span, roughly. So this actually, thinking about it that way, it's not, it's like 100 games a year. That's not too bad. So silver is okay. Again, the whole reason you're playing these video games is for fun, right? So as long as you're having fun, you shouldn't care at all what rank you're in. If you really want to get better and you're thinking of how can I check if I'm improving at a faster rate, one thing that you want to do is you can kind of set guidelines for yourself. And it shouldn't be, am I in silver or gold? Because that's just a broad category. It's hard to tell where you really are in those regions. You should say, am I able to play, by 8 minutes, I have X supply. 2 weeks from now, by 8 minutes, is that number of supply I have higher or is it the same? If it's the same, that means I'm not really improving. If it's higher, that means I'm improving. So find some way to measure yourself and do it by that way. Don't worry about what league you're in or wins or losses. Try to find some easy, objective way to measure yourself that takes all the random factors of the skill of your opponents and you know, the Blizzard way they're ranking things. Don't even worry about that. Just find an objective way to measure yourself. Keep track of that, and you'll find that you're able to measure your progress a lot more effectively. Next question is going to be from Matt R. It's a high platinum Zerg player. He'd love to hear what is the best counter versus a Mech Terran now with the new Blue Flame Hellions. So, really, if you think about in the past how Zerg would play versus Mech, they would, you know, mostly use a combination, maybe some Mulis early to take map control, and switch that up with Roaches. Because Roaches are very effective against Mech armies in cost-for-cost battles. They're easy to get out, you can take a lot of expansions, overwhelm early Mech armies, then by the time your 200 food Mech army comes out, you can stall them a bit with Roaches and infested Terran eggs, and then hopefully you have Broodlords up at that time. Now, a couple things that have changed is, one, those early Mech armies are about, like the mid-game ones, the 100 to 140 food pushes, are like several times stronger, because the Hellions have 50% better tanking, they do 300% times the damage to your Roaches, and Widow Mines, of course, are extremely effective against Roaches as well. So you have to consider, this is problematic, right? What are some ways to get through the Widow Mine fields? Maybe I can drop on top of the tanks, and if I lead with some empty Overlords, the Widow Mines will hit those, and the real ones, you know, Roach drops are a little more effective. But you don't want to drop on Blue Flame Hellions. They have Viking support. That's a good way, is a Roach drop on top of the Mech army. Another thing to consider, Mutilus might be a little better controlling the map now, but you got to watch out for the Widow Mines, so I'm not sure if I'd go for Mutilus. Perhaps Swarm Host can chip away at the Mech army, depending on the siege tank count. If there's not many siege tank, Swarm Hosts are going to be great. If there's a lot of siege tanks, the Locust won't get that close. So look at their composition. Maybe Swarm Hosts are a good idea. The last thing to consider is, okay, my Roach drop is fine against those small mid-game armies. The late-game push, though, I mean, 200 food of Roaches is not going to cut it. That's where you might want to consider Broodlords, maybe not so good anymore. Hellbats kill the Broodlings much faster than normal Hellions did, and the Ravens are amazing against Broodlords because you can have like 1 billion Hunter Seeker missiles and just blow them all up instantly. So, Broodlords maybe not as good. Ultralists, though, are very good because now they do much, much, much more damage to light units, which allows them to plow through that Hellion force at the front much faster. The problem with Ultralists is you've still got to worry about those Widow Mines, so again, maybe combine an Ultralist with drop. Dropping them on top of the siege tanks is your answer. Basically, try to use that drop play a lot more, as that's the real best way to navigate past that siege tank range and get right on top of those guys you can do to massive damage. So let's jump on to the next question. Which unit received the biggest buff from Heart of the Swarm, and which one received the biggest nerf? So, I'm not going to consider Heart of the Swarm units, and I'm not even going to consider the Hellbat as being a buff for the Hellion, because I'll say that's a new unit. Because if you do consider that as a buff to the Hellion, that it can transform, then that's the biggest buff. If you don't consider that, and you don't consider any of the new units as buffs, because they're new units, I would say the biggest buff by far, I think, is the Raven. Because that Raven is just, the Seeker Missile is so much cheaper. Like, if you have the energy upgrade, you start with the Seeker Missile. I mean, you can even harass worker lines with it. You can blow up armies with it. It's very, very effective. Your opponent can dodge it with good micro. But you know what? To do that, they have to pull their units out of the fight, which also helps you because the unit's not attacking. And it's only 75 energy, which makes it much more effective because you're not worried if you mess it up. It's not like they're useless. You know, they'll get it back much faster. And of course, you can cast it from very far away, 10 range. You can cast it before you're in range to be feedback. You can cast it before, they can fungal you, but you can still cast on anything because it got such a long range now. So it's a really, really strong utility. I've been experimenting a lot with adding Ravens. I encourage you guys to do as well because I think they're a lot stronger now in Heart of the Swarm. The biggest nerf, interestingly enough, I would have to say, in a way, is the Broodlord. It hasn't been nerfed at all. But the reason I'm saying I think it has the biggest nerf, even more so than the Infestor. I think the Infestor is still very strong. But the Broodlord, as soon as they introduced the Tempest, it's very hard to use Brood Lords against Protoss because, you know, they get a 3-shot by Tempest. And so, yes, Tempests are terrible against, like, everything else Zerg has, for the most part. I mean, they're useful if it's a siege situation, but in general, they're not very good against most units. But against the Brood Lords, a couple Tempests will just pick them off easy, and then, you know, then a Tempest can just sit back and do whatever, but they've killed the Brood Lords, they've done their job. Not very effective against Protoss. Against Terran, a similar thing with the Ravens. They're very, very vulnerable to Hunter-Seeker missiles. You have 6 Brood Lords, about 8 to 9 Hunter-Seeker missiles will kill them all, and you can do it with just 4 Ravens, and of course the Ravens doing it from a distance where they can easily back up, stay safe, and they're not gonna, you know, they'll be available for next battle too. So I think because of the Raven buff and the new Tempest unit, Brood Lords in a way got a pretty big nerf. They're almost replaced by the Swarm Host, so they're still very different units, but I wouldn't worry too much about Brood Lords anymore. And as a Zerg player, you can't really just say, oh, I don't care how the first 15 minutes of the game goes, because once I get Brood Lords, I win. That type of mentality doesn't really cut it anymore for the Zerg players. So, going to have to rely on a different strategy now. Brood Lords got significantly nerfed. So that wraps up this episode of Rules of Engagement. Thank you guys for watching, and be sure to tune in tomorrow at 5 p.m. Eastern for a great match between Rain and Flying. And then after that match, we'll be analyzing analyzing the matches played right before this show. That was Last versus Sulky. And also remember, we got a match on Sunday as well, 5 p.m. Eastern, Snoot versus Saucy. Tune in for that as well. See you guys tomorrow.